I don't think anyone expected Niko versus Setsuna to end in the way that it did. Of course, people probably, predicted the ultimate outcome of this, but the way these events go, I think it was written pretty well, although the fight really only lasted 4 chapters, and as I was rereading it, or skimming through it basically, I noticed that, this was the main focus of this entire interaction, with the Akoya stuff sort of happening in the background the entire time. But this fight is, I think, again, it's probably one of my favorite fights as of reasons I really liked it. But I also think that it's also a polarizing fight for most people, mainly because of Setsuna. Setsuna probably outperformed everyone's expectations of him, because as it stands right now, Setsuna is probably one of the strongest characters on the good guy side. And that's big, because we know how strong Niko is. Motemba, back in Kengan vs. Purgatory, said that Niko and Edward were about as strong as one another, and Edward might be stronger than Niko. And that was 2 years ago, more than 2 years ago. That's what Motemba said. This also makes sense because all the Wormhands seem to be around the similar level of strength. Again, I'll refer to the Zaiji flashback where you have Jan and Edward who were portrayed in a similar level of strength, at least in comparison to Zaiji, as well as Faye was there as well, which I think is a bit more controversial, but I've covered most of this stuff before in my Edward vs. Faye video. What's important here is that Niko's scaling is consistent. It makes sense. He should be as strong as the other Wormheads. That makes sense. The problem is that Setsuna seems to be doing a bit too well, or was doing a bit too well for some people's liking. However, I would want to put on my Niko apologetics hat. Never thought I would need my Niko apologetics hat in my life, but here I am talking on behalf of Niko, playing as his lawyer so that he doesn't get too discredited for what had gone down. The last time we saw Setsuna fight was way back in Ashura, which was years ago. And since then, we do know that Setsuna has sort of wanted revenge against Niko, which means that he would have to have improved, especially if he has a goal like that in mind. And so, because there's basically years in between what was happening in this chapter and Kengan Ashura, it does leave room for essentially hyperbolic growth in terms of how strong a person can get, because Setsuna has years of preparation and training to get him to the spot that he is confident that he could defeat Niko. And so, it's no surprise really, or it shouldn't come as a surprise, when Setsuna is basically scales above someone like Ryan 2 years ago. It shouldn't come as a surprise. But what's very interesting is what Setsuna says in this chapter, where he says that the reason why he was basically thanking him after he landed that kick, because that was when the opportunity to kill Niko was a bit more feasible for him. I think that's what Setsuna kind of saw at that point. He was like, alright, now that I've landed that critical hit, because it was a critical hit, a lot of people thought he would avoid that kick, he would do some formation. No, he took that hit, although he did block it, now that I think about it. He blocked it, did launch a counter, but it still did massive damage. And Setsuna was like, hey, if you're in this position because you didn't take me seriously. And that's very big, because what Setsuna is trying to say here, and I think people are going to misunderstand this, because they're going to compare it to Edward's situation, because that's not what's going on. See, in Edward's situation, Edward was right in his assessment of power between him and Ryan and everyone else. He was right. The problem was that he never finished the job. He never did. He thought he was too good to finish the job until it was basically too late. Niko is making a very different mistake from Edward. He misjudged Setsuna's power. And Setsuna is basically saying, you should have taken me seriously. Which means Niko had to take him seriously in order to ultimately defeat him. And that's what Niko realizes towards the end of the fight, where he's basically dealt critical blows to Setsuna. And he's just like, wait a minute, I hit him in this place and he's still in the middle of his chest. If that wasn't an instant death, this man should be on death's door. Why is he still moving? And Setsuna displays his basic drive. Like, he has an insane amount of drive to kill Niko. And this drive is basically Setsuna wanting to become a pseudo-god, or wanting Oma to be grateful to him. You know, a little bit of acknowledgement. This shows that, yeah, he's kind of a bit insane, but it does show just how committed he is to Oma and people like Ryuki, but specifically Oma, and how his drive to basically become a pseudo-god is just, I think it trumps whatever Niko is trying to do. Again, another nail in the coffin for Niko being the main antagonist. He just doesn't have the drive Setsuna does. But during those moments, Niko was genuinely afraid of Setsuna and realized that, well, he has to end the fight himself. In a sense, he can't afford to linger or wait for Setsuna to die or to go down on his own, because again, he has a critical blow. Setsuna was probably going to go down regardless of whether or not Niko used whatever he used off screen. But Setsuna was still a genuine threat even at death's door. And the art for those panels, because I think the art for this chapter was, again, fairly amazing, showing basically how Setsuna was just, again, the Setsuna panels that were drawn here were insane. Again, this was mainly a Setsuna focused chapter. All the hype was around him, but ultimately he did die in this chapter. Or if he isn't dead, he's going to die soon after. Because, again, Niko seems to have dealt a critical blow to Setsuna way before he had to use what was probably Divine Demon. I know some people are speculating that it might be removal. Nah, it's probably Divine Demon. And it's a shame, while we're on that note, that we don't get to see the final moments. But my guess is the reason why is because, well, that is being saved for the future of the story. Whoever Niko will end up facing in the future. Probably Wakatsuki. But we end up jumping forward in time, and basically Gilbert Wu comes in and basically confirms that Okoye has kind of been defeated. Again, everyone kind of expected that. Like, who thought Okoye stood a chance against William or Gilbert? It just is impossible. But I do think he has the best chance of surviving rather than Setsuna. Even though I'm open to Setsuna sort of living for a short amount of time. That's what I think. I think he either dies or is dead in this chapter, or goes on to die maybe a chapter or two later. But I think we've basically reached the end for Setsuna at this point. Fairly good chapter, massive build up to chapter 250, which I'm expecting something big or a major plot point to happen at that point. And it seems like things are just ramping up. I do wonder, what chapters are we going to get? What the next few chapters are going to be about? Because if I remember correctly, we still need to do, first it's the match between Shen that's supposed to come, and then the Berserker Brawl. Wait, Berserker Brawl? What am I in the past? The real championship tournament. That is going to probably come after the whole match with Wulong. So, very interested to see what will happen in the future. And yeah, that's it. Don't forget to like and sub, and until next time, take it easy.